Car Squad, what's happening? Hey, glad to be back with you here again, and we are continuing on in our conversation on guardrails. And what does it mean for you and I to put in these personal standards of behavior that help us ultimately make really wise choices and live a life with fewer regrets. So last week we looked at this idea of healthy friendships and how do we put guardrails up in our relationships. And one of the things that we restated over and over again is this principle, that your friends will influence the direction and quality of your life. So what we've learned on this journey so far is that your friends and my friends fall into two categories. They're either wise, in other words, they understand that each day of life is connected, that decisions are connected, and what I do impacts tomorrow. So they're either in the wise category or they're in the foolish category. And in Scripture, we find this passage that we've been looking at, and it says this: walk with the wise and become wise, but a companion of fools suffers harm. And what that means for us is this: if you walk with people, if you do life with people who are wise, you will grow in wisdom. You will have a better life. You will be able to make better decisions. But if you surround yourself with people who are foolish and the wrong kind of influence in your life, well, then you are going to be impacted and affected by it. The way that they live will eventually impact you. And we called this last week the Cannonball Effect, right? Somebody jumps in a pool, the water gets all over the people on the outside. This week what I want to do is dive in a little bit deeper in this idea of how do we work through that realistically. Because some of you were probably sitting there last week going, yeah, Joey, I hear you. I do have relationships that probably aren't the best, but how do I, one, determine what those relationships are, who they are, and then two, what do I do about it from there? How do I actually dissolve the relationship? Do I dissolve the relationship? How do I have that conversation with people? So that's what we're going to talk about as we continue forward. So let's take a look at your relationships and go, okay, is this a person that I need to kind of pull back from? Is this a person that I need to put a guardrail up around or not? Now, let's take a look at what is a fool. Now, if we take a second and think about that, a fool is a person who understands and knows the difference between right and wrong. They get it. They understand what they're doing, but they just don't care. You may even try to intervene in this person's life and say, hey, don't you know where that's going to lead? And they're like, doesn't matter. I don't care. I'm going to do whatever it is that I want to do. That person is a fool. And in the Bible, in Proverbs chapter 9, verse 8, it gives us some great insight into how we're supposed to respond to somebody who is a fool. And this is what it says. It says, he who corrects a scoffer gets shame for himself. Now, scoffer is another word that's used in the Bible for fool. So if you correct them, they're just going to throw shame right back on you. They're going to attack you, make fun of you. They're going to hurt you. They're going to scoff at you and your wisdom. And then in verse 8, we see it continues. It says, do not rebuke a scoffer or he will hate you. Do not correct a scoffer or he will hate you, but rebuke a wise man and he will love you. So there's that clear difference. That scoffer, that fool is that person that even when you try to intercede in their life, they're like, you know what? I don't care. I'm going to do it again. So here's some things to think about. If you have a friend that's not concerned about their life, they're not going to be concerned about your life. If you have a friend or group of friends who don't take care of themselves, they're probably not going to take care of you. If you have a friend who's not concerned about their family, they're not going to be concerned about your family. If you have a friend or group of friends that doesn't care about their reputation, they're not going to care much about your reputation either. That if you're surrounded by people that live and act this way, this is not good for you and this is not to your benefit. I'm sure that some of this sounds really harsh because you have very close friends that are living very different lives than the life that you want to live. They are in the foolish or the scoffer category. And you're struggling. It's like, hey, Joey, if I start putting up guardrails, what am I going to do about those friendships and relationships? And here's what I want you to think about is that there's two components that you should not get confused, and that's compassion and wisdom. Compassion and wisdom. Compassion is that part of me that causes me to care and love other people, to serve other people, to give my life to and for other people. That's compassion. But then there's wisdom, understanding that my decisions are all connected. Now I want you to listen to this principle. Compassion will never require you to make an unwise decision about yourself. Compassion will never require you to make an unwise decision about yourself. So when you use compassion as an excuse to put yourself in places that are unsafe, to do things that are not right, to make decisions that you will ultimately regret. When you use compassion as an excuse, oh, but I love him, oh, but I love her, oh, but I care about my friends, so I'm just going to be there and I'm going to do this with them because I care and I love them. That's not real compassion. That is misguided compassion. This is the best thing for you to do is stay on the safe side of the guardrail. Because on the safe side of the guardrail, that's the only place that you can truly help your friends when they eventually do crash. Get the old get fiddle here. Ready? So, that doesn't sound good. Let's try this again. There we go. When it comes to our relationships and our friendships, there is a tension that really does exist. And there's a tension that even I've taught you, because I've talked about this principle of every person needs to have 3 people who are far from God but close to you, so that you can have an impact and that you can influence and you can help them know who Christ is, right? And that you need to be thinking about the one. Who's that one person that you're constantly praying for, that you're having conversations with about God? Now, there is that tension, right? It's like, Joey, you're telling me that I need to be around people who don't know Jesus, but at the same time, you're saying you need to identify those people and put guardrails up. But this is a matter of tension, and here's how I want to explain it. Now, what makes a guitar work really well is the principle of tension. It's the tension on each of these guitar strings that gives us the note. The more tension or the less tension is where we find the right sound and the right note. Now, I want you to think about your friendships and your relationships in this idea of tension. So let's think of the friends that you have in your life that are probably living life in a different way that you are. And what we're looking for is the right sound decisions in your life. So that's going to give us that nice full sound. This is the E string, so that's what we want. Now, what you want to do in your life is you want to make sure that you are able to consistently give a note that's on pitch, that your life is living in a way that reflects really great decision making. Not that you do everything right, but you have a standard of behavior, you have guardrails that allows you to play the right and live by the right way and the right note, the way that Christ has called us to. Now, there comes this moment though when our friendships will actually adjust the tension in our lives, and that influence will begin to change. And if you're noticing in your life that you're just not quite the same decision making that you were, that you're treating people differently than you were, then what may be happening is that the tension is changing, and the people that are in your life are causing you to get a little flat. The tension is pulling you too far in the downward direction and is changing the note. So when you go out and you try to do the things that God's called you to do, it doesn't sound right. It doesn't work right. And then that impacts your family, and that impacts your decisions, and that's going to impact your schoolwork. What you want to do is you want to, I'm going to put up the right amount of guardrails so that my friendships aren't pulling me downward, but that I'm still able to have an influence in their life, but maintain the right note. Okay? Now, the same can be true on the other end of the spectrum, is that you can live your life in such a way that you surround yourself with people who are only Christians, and you never talk to anybody who's not a believer in Jesus, and that you're so far removed that you put yourself in a bubble and you don't tell people about Jesus anymore. You just do your thing with all of your Christian friends, and that, I would say, probably gets you in the other direction, pulled too much. That's too much tension. And when you have that happen, guess what? The chords don't sound right either. Okay? So what we want to find is that healthy balance, so that we can play and live the way that we're supposed to, and that's with the right amount of tension. Here's where we go from here. Examine your friendships and your relationships. Which friendships and relationships are pulling you out of tune, that are adjusting the tension too low in your life, and you realize, I got to put some guardrails up so that I can get to living the way that I want to. And what are some of the things that you need to be doing this week and next week to start that? Maybe you need to have a conversation with somebody and just flat out tell them, listen, there's some things that I'm not comfortable with that you do in your life. And because of that, I'm probably not going to be hanging out with you as much. Listen, I've had to do that. I did that as a teenager. I've even had to do that as an adult, where I've had to go to people and say, listen, you've crossed a line here that is just not good for me to be around. But the reality is those people do come back in their moments of crisis. And because I'm healthy and because I'm in a healthy place, because I put up guardrails, I'm able to give them extraordinary help, extraordinary compassion, and extraordinary love. But that was only because I put myself in a position to be healthy. So what are the relationships in your life that you need to really adjust? What are the relationships in your life that you need to put some guardrails up? You're writing your future. Your next decision is an extension of your story. So write it really well. Write it really well.